Glitchtrap and the Mimic. The Mimic and Glitchtrap. William Afton and the evil baby AI who was put into a chip in Helpy and then became the Mimic. A debate as old as the average FNaF fan. With Secret of the Mimic getting closer and closer, we're all expecting a lot of mysteries to get solved, but there's one big question that's been on people's mind ever since the Mimic was properly introduced. Is Glitchtrap the Mimic? And if so, was he always? That's two questions, but shut up. And that is a tricky question with a lot of baggage attached. So to really get into that, we have to go back to the beginning. So before we can actually talk about Glitchtrap's proper appearance, we need to dig into a bit of less known information about how this character came to be. Now, it's been revealed by both Steelwool and Scott that Help Wanted wasn't really meant to be a story game when they first thought it up. Initially, it was just a remake of FNaF 1.
Like, what was the first thing that you did, like, you thought of in Help Wanted? Was it the story or like...
But we started that saying, hey, we want to make the original FNaF 1 in VR. And that was the thing. That was the thing that started it and sold it.
There was no, like, tapes, Glitchtrap. It was just remaking FNaF 1.
It was make FNaF 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we had done, here's part 1. And we're like, well, you know, because he really wanted to make part 1 VR.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, you know, we're going to also do part 2.
Yeah.
And let's do part 3.
Yep.
And let's do what we can for part 4, you know.
After they were done adding more and more onto it, we were left with this huge collection of VR remakes and original minigames, and that is where Scott came in to interject a story. On a Reddit post, he explained, "It was important for me that Help Wanted mean something. I didn't want just a meaningless collection of minigames, although I'm sure most people would have been okay with that. I wanted it to be canon. Because of that, we got the indie dev and the idea of Help Wanted being a real video game in-universe made by Fazbear Entertainment. We got the tapes, and of course we got Glitchtrap. But Glitchtrap wasn't always the creepy, dead-eyed mascot costume that we know and love. Originally, he looked like this. Now, obviously this is a very unfinished model, so it's impossible to know what his finalized design might have been, but once upon a time, Glitchtrap was just a version of Springtrap. He's basically indistinguishable except for a few stitches that have been added to his model for some reason. He also would appear sometimes as just a pair of glowing purple eyes, and we actually see this version of him in videos of the older builds. Based on what we do have available, he would have acted almost exactly like Glitchtrap does currently, but he would actually jump scare us if we failed to complete the merge ending, and he was also fully set up for the keyhole ending and has basically his entire animation intact in older builds. Veterans of these games also know that Vanny was once meant to appear in this game. He was part of the first teachers for the game and was meant to appear in Pizza Party. Notably, to my knowledge, we don't actually have any evidence of him ever being in the place of Glitchtrap. He was only for Pizza Party. But, of course, he and the weird spring Glitchtrap would be replaced by the Spring Bonnie Man, the creepy suit we call Glitchtrap. So what does the game tell us about him? Well, we learned from Tape Girl that he appeared after the dev team scanned some weird old circuit boards to speed up the development process and coding of the characters. Glitchtrap appeared as an anomaly in the game and drove the beta tester, Jeremy, insane when it attempted to escape the game through his mind. At first, it made sense to just assume Glitchtrap was Afton back again in a digital form, but there's a lot of oddities with that. Firstly, Afton wasn't really haunting any circuit boards. Contrary to what some might believe, but Afton haunts his own body as Springtrap, not the robot. We can even hear his heart beating in Pizzeria Simulator. Even if he did haunt the circuitry, that would have been burnt beyond recognition and use by Henry's fire. On top of that, according to Fazbear Entertainment, they used
proprietary technology developed by Fazbear Entertainment. Our VR development teams were able to use vintage control boards almost like plug and play, digitally recreating performances and personalities from the past in an instant.
And that is an interesting way of wording it, isn't it? Recreating personalities. And let's talk about Glitchtrap's design. Yeah, it's a variation of Spring Bonnie, but it's not like anything we've ever seen Afton wear. It's not an animatronic suit with segmented limbs and actual eye holes. It's a mascot costume with a one-piece body and a mouth that you see through. And it's not like they didn't have the normal Spring Bonnie. They did. They even had a Glitchtrap that was one-to-one with Springtrap. But they changed it and replaced them both with a design that Afton's never been associated with. There's also the strange case of the real-life images that were in the game. See, in the first teaser for the game, we got this weird picture of an animatronic head, and when the game first came out, hitting the secret button in the Exotic Butters basket would make the prize counter TV flash with different images of real animatronic parts and circuit boards. People traced these images back to the real-life Showbiz Pizza, and Scott ended up having them removed from the game so people wouldn't harass this real business over the silly bear game. However, just because they were removed doesn't mean they don't mean anything. Scott said he wanted cool pictures of animatronic parts, and that must have been for a reason. And No, it wasn't teasing the movie. Help Wanted has nothing to do with the FNaF movie. These photos show a bunch of animatronic parts, and given what we were told about the story from Tape Girl, it seems like they're meant to be linked to those mysterious circuit boards that were sent by Fazbear, which also means that these images are likely linked to Glitchtrap. And a final note, one thing about Glitchtrap's plan that's interesting in this game is the fact that he uses Tape Girl's own voice against us. He replicates her voice when he appears in front of us and seemingly tampered with her tapes to create a fake one that goads us into helping him escape. Now with that out of the way, let's move to... God, this game fell off hard. Now, Glitchtrap didn't play as direct of a role in this story, but he did still act as the driving force in the plot. While Special Delivery's story was cut in half thanks to the emails never releasing and then the game being entirely canned, what we do have reveals that Glitchtrap was messing around with Vanessa's mind and doing some weird online searches. Stuff about how long a person is conscious when cut in half, and Viking Blood Eagle calendars. But what's really interesting was the line of how to induce compliance in human subjects. That line always struck me as odd. It's so detached, robotic even. It doesn't read like something a person would write, especially with how it bothers to include the word human, like whatever is typing it sees itself as inhuman. And speaking of the emails, despite how absurd the gameplay can be sometimes in AR, the emails connect to it as well. We learn that the reason the delivery service animatronics are acting so hostile is because of a virus that was released into the system of the company contracted to make the robots. However, the way this happened is kind of weird. Hey, Anna, the casing of the animatronics is really hard to get off. Can you approve me to use the power drill? Best, Dan. Raha is the only one certified. Quit asking. Need to get the circuit boards out. Anna says you're the only one who can use the power drill. Hey guys, I just got kicked out of the system. I finished scanning the last set of circuit boards Dan brought me, but now I'm locked out. Is anyone else getting this unknown error? The Glitchtrap virus enters the system through scanned circuit boards, so it seems that Fazbear is using the same special technology to recreate the personalities of the animatronics in the delivery service. This also reinforces what Help Wanted hinted at. The circuit boards Glitchtrap came from originated from animatronics. But what's odd is that instead of just being sent circuit boards, the delivery service is sent full animatronics to remove the circuit boards from manually. Glitchtrap, for whatever reason, is already in other animatronics before he gets released into the system. Forget William not possessing Springtrap circuit boards. He certainly doesn't possess a bunch of animatronics. Well, I mean he did, but we'll get into that after we talk about... Help Wanted's mobile edition didn't give us a whole lot, but it was the first introduction to Princess Quest that we got, and where we got to see and hear Glitchtrap say, which leans more into the idea that Glitchtrap is actually Afton back again. However, before we get further into all that, we now have to delve into... Yeah, I'm gonna just talk about this very briefly because I know how much of a pain talking about this book series is. All I'm gonna say is, it's interesting that Scott made a series that acts as a sequel to Ultimate Custom Night, in which we see Afton escape his torment not by becoming Glitchtrap, but by possessing a bunch of other robots after the fire and then merging them together into basically a giant rabbit-eared version of Ennard. However, Afton's amalgamation is quickly defeated and all the parts are destroyed and sent to the bottom of a lake, while Afton's spirit finally loses its grip on reality and moves on to the afterlife. No Glitchtrap, no coming back, just permanent death. Alright, Frights talk done. Time to get into... Well, this is where things get really messy, which is, I guess, very on brand for this game. With Security Breach, we got to see Glitchtrap's master plan fully realized. He got Vanessa into the Pizzaplex so she could kill kids as Vanny. He infected basically every single robot in the building, and he had Vanny tunnel underground into the buried remains of Freddy Fazbear's pizza place so that Vanessa could enter a weird room full of burners and hook up a burnt rabbit animatronic with a corpse in it to a charging station so that Glitchtrap could inhabit it. Huh. Well, that's something. Kinda looks like Glitchtrap's plan was to literally resurrect Afton's body. It's in what seems to be Henry's maze. It's literally a burnt spring Bonnie with a corpse in it. Yeah, it's got new parts and 2 arms, but we have a missing Glamrock Bonnie that could account for that. Heck, it's even being guarded by what's basically Molten Freddy on steroids, and the princess ended up being named Cassidy in the files. Security Breach also gave us some tidbits of information with Glitchtrap in terms of his design and behavior. We got Vanny's suit, which is very reminiscent of Glitchtrap's design as a mascot costume, further connecting Glitchtrap to this weird style of costume. We are also given several Fredbear's Family Diner posters for some strange reason, and this includes a poster of a design very reminiscent of Glitchtrap, potentially indicating that either he based his form off this poster, or that this suit really did exist once upon a time. And as the final thing, we have Glitchtrap, for whatever reason, stealing personal information from Vanessa about her family, and then recycling it as a fake tragic backstory for Patient 46. Security Breach presents us with Glitchtrap straight up being William Afton, and all of Pizzeria Simulator being undone. Afton got Vanessa to rebuild his broken body and put his soul back in it so that he could conduct his evil master plan to take over the Pizzaplex while hiding out in his lair. He had the Tangle, and the spirit of his other victims now grown to giant size, guarding him, and all he really had to deal with was Cassidy, who was now haunting the Princess Quest games and was trying to stop him. It was a very strange story decision, to say the least, but soon the name Cassidy was scrubbed from the files, and we started to get new information that began painting a very different image of the current story. Now, the books did something really odd. And by really odd, I don't mean like having things like Under Construction and B7. When I say odd, I mean basically not having Glitchtrap appear at all. Really, the closest we get is GGY, where Gregory uses the name Dr. Rabbit. But for the most part, the books instead focus on a new character, the Mimic. Before we even knew his name, the Mimic was introduced in the Tales epilogues as a burnt endoskeleton with claws, a shiny new head, and a pair of long, bent ears on the top of his head, almost like rabbit ears. Said endoskeleton was trapped in the underground pizzeria, and from the start, everyone was basically on board with this unnamed endoskeleton being Burntrap. That was until, we got the Mimic's name revealed, and then people were like, actually, this might just be a parallel to Burntrap, or maybe it's Baby, or I don't know, some other shit. But it's undeniable that the books heavily focused on the Mimic. We learned its backstory. We learned how it liked wearing mascot costumes and white tigers. And we got the Storyteller, which had the Mimic infecting the entire Pizzaplex with its code and making all the animatronics act weird, which was exactly what Glitchtrap would later do. It was like the books took everything Glitchtrap and Burntrap did and then linked it to the Mimic. And then the next big thing happened. Ruins where things get good. Throughout the DLC, we don't really have any direct signs of Glitchtrap. We got the Vanny mask, and the Mascot and the ruined music men have rabbit ears, but that's not really all that much. Although we do have this creepy digital rabbit, so maybe that's Glitchtrap's new form. But as we go further into the Pizzaplex, we find ourselves in Vanny's office and discover Princess Quest 3 with a sword plunged into it, and Glitchtrap's imprint on the wall. But Princess Quest 3 is the ending where Glitchtrap loses, isn't it? So what's up with that weird blue rabbit, and who is Gregory trapped by? Well, as we go deeper, we find ourselves in Burntrap's lair and discover that not only is his charging station empty, but also that this isn't Henry's maze at all. It's just 3 rooms and 2 hallways with doors that lead right out of the area. And then, of course, we head down and we find what was leading us here all along. The Mimic. After a brief chase, we escape it and learn that the creepy rabbit entity was in fact part of a security system called MXES that was made to trap the Mimic. It wasn't Glitchtrap. It wasn't even really evil. But then, what happened to Glitchtrap? What happened to Burntrap? Ruin seems to tell us the answers to that as well. Analyzing the Mimic's design, we can see that it has a lot of mismatched parts. Most notably though, its right hand is visibly a replacement for something else. It's got less rust and it's stuck on in an awkward way. But the other hand? That's Burntrap's hand. Comparing the two models, they're practically identical. Mimic's palm is a bit wider to fit all the fingers, but other than that, it's a spot-on match. On top of that, in Burntrap's lair, we can find a strange claw mark on the vent leading into the office. It's a right hand with 5 fingers, and we then find this same claw mark in another vent, this time right by a collapsed vent that goes directly into Mimic's prison. With these details, the game seems to be telling us that Burntrap was actually the Mimic this whole time, and that the Mimic lost his other clawed hand when it was sealed in the costume closet by Gregory. And what's more, Ruin connects one of Glitchtrap's most important aspects to the Mimic, that being his design. Glitchtrap's mascot costume was always very unique, and never fit with anything we had before in the series. But now, Ruin was establishing that the mascot costumes Mimic was so accustomed to wearing were the same style of suit as Glitchtrap. One-piece bodies with a mouth that you look through. On top of that, there's a 70s Freddy cutout that can be found in the underground that's a match to the style of the Fredbear's Family Diner posters from the base game. This also means that Glitchtrap's suit and design likely originated from the 70s as well, the same era that Mimic was from. Ruin redefined how many people saw Glitchtrap and built off Tails' connection between him and the Mimic. Now, it seems less like Glitchtrap was Afton reborn, and more a digital persona that Mimic took on, with Burntrap being the physical manifestation of that role, a role that was lost after Princess Quest 3 was completed, leading Mimic to default back to its base form, or so we thought. With Help Wanted 2, we really didn't get a lot in terms of direct story for most of the game. However, from the start, it becomes clear that Glitchtrap is still at play here. We see his face on the levels, and as we get further into the game, we also start seeing his hand as well. But things really come to a head with the endings, of which there are two. The Faz Force ending and the Princess Quest ending. When we collect all 6 Faz Force action figures, they fuse into Faz Bototron before suddenly the simulation changes and we see Glitchtrap's hand emerge from a charging station right before we get swarmed by staff bots. We wake up inside Mascot just as he gives Cassie the Vanny mask. Our Vanny mask. In the Princess Quest ending, we first have to unlock 6 memory dolls in order to get access to the game. From there, we break out of the normal flow of the level and make our way to the old man, who gives us the Glitchtrap plush from Help Wanted. We then give that to Vanny, who turns it back into Glitchtrap right before crushing it and killing him once and for all. But this is kind of confusing, isn't it? What was up with Faz Force? What are the memory dolls? What was Glitchtrap's plan? Well, to answer part of that, we have to look at our good friend Helpy. Helpy normally just acts as a simple tutorial character, telling us about the levels we've unlocked and whatnot. But when we get a Faz Force figure, he changes. Should we ignore it, he becomes increasingly impatient. He gets mad at us for not progressing our collection. And when the Faz Force ending is finished, Helpy's screen changes to show him relaxing on vacation like his work is done. Alternatively, if we were to do the Princess Quest ending first, killing Glitchtrap results in Helpy vanishing from the screen entirely. So it seems the game is telling us Helpy is actually the same as Glitchtrap, just a fake persona put on to trick us into collecting the Faz Force figures, which results in our death and Cassie being given the mask. So, Glitchtrap uses Helpy as a disguise to get what he wants, just like the Mimic. And his master plan was to get the Vanny mask to Cassie, which was ultimately used to free the Mimic. If they're not the same guy, they sure do work very closely. But there is the issue of the memory dolls and Glitchtrap's death. I'll get to the death thing in a bit, but the memory plushies are a bit weird. Glitchtrap seems very connected to the memories of Afton's victims, which is admittedly a bit odd if he's just a program trying to copy William. However, this isn't a deal breaker. Mimic can easily be connecting himself to memories in order to sustain his code after Princess Quest 3. Okay? Got all that stuff down? Good. Now for the big twist. Ducko's second interview with Scott really shook things up and gave us some massive reveals about our favorite little headache, Burntrap. Now, to really no one's surprise, Security Breach's story was mishandled, and that's mainly because Scott didn't actually tell Steel Wool the plot.
And I had a specific story for this in mind, okay, for Security Breach. I really did. I had a very specific story in mind, and it is very different than the one that got in the game. And I think a part of that is the way that I conveyed that to Steel Wool, because what I was trying to do was I was trying to tell Steel Wool to do specific things throughout the game, meanwhile not telling them what the story plot was. Because in my head, I was thinking, okay, when people find this, they will connect this to this to this, and it will all be revealed. And I thought I could do that without telling Steel Wool the story plot. That didn't work out very well because they got all of these pieces and they thought it was their job to connect them in a way that made sense.
But with Burntrap, we learn a lot about how his story developed. For starters, Burntrap was never meant to exist the way we see him in Security Breach. Hell, he wasn't even meant to move.
When it comes to Burntrap, originally, Burntrap was never supposed to move. He was supposed to just be something you saw in the corners, or like if you were walking past machinery, you might be able to peek in between two things and see him in the corner or propped up against a wall. And he had a very specific purpose. And I'm not going to say what that purpose was, but realistically, he never moved. Well, obviously, that's not what we got in Security Breach. In Security Breach, we got a capsule opening and purple smoke flowing out and him climbing out and coming to get you.
With this interview, I believe Scott has fully clarified what happened with Burntrap and how Mimic as we know it came to be. Steel Wool was given puzzle pieces but not told how to put it together, so they did their best to salvage a story out of this. They had the underground remains of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place, a burnt Springtrap variant, and what looked like a giant molten Freddy, and so they put these different pieces together into the Burntrap ending. They likely thought it really was Afton back again, which is also probably why Cassidy was the princess's name originally. But of course, this wasn't the intent. That's why the princess's file name was changed, and likely why the Tales epilogues exist. Scott wanted to do something with Glitchtrap and Burntrap, but now the story had Burntrap be stuck underground and be a physical robot, So he worked the epilogues to have the Mimic be sealed down there, closing off that part of the plot for Ruin to continue course correcting. Okay, so we all on the same page? Now there's just one last game to go into. Yeah, not a lot to go into here, mostly just Secret Mimic teasers. However, the fact that Tiger Plush is given by Glitchtrap is a pretty clear sign in the direction of him being Mimic, as Afton would have no reason to be holding on to that. Alright, almost done. I swear, I just gotta talk about... The guidebooks suck. They're full of mistakes, written by uncredited ghost authors, and almost all of them were made before Ruin and Tales. Them calling Burntrap or Glitchtrap William Afton should not be taken as serious proof. So putting it all together, I think we can conclude that yeah, Glitchtrap is most likely the Mimic. I think it's possible that very early in development for Help Wanted there was an idea for it to actually be Afton, given that Glitchtrap's beta design was a version of Springtrap, but the introduction of the 70s style mascot costume look pretty clearly differentiates Glitchtrap from past iterations of Afton. FNaF AR's emails introduced the idea that Glitchtrap's AI came from multiple robots, and not from the charred remains of Spring Bonnie. Thanks to Scott, we also know that all the stuff that made Burntrap and Glitchtrap look like a reborn Afton and Security Breach was purely the result of miscommunication, and Tales, Ruin, and Help Wanted 2 put in a bunch of legwork to make everything Burntrap and Glitchtrap did link back to the Mimic. Everything from being an AI that controls the Pizzaplex, being a burnt endo underneath it, the 70s mascot costume style, and Glitchtrap's final plan in Help Wanted 2 links firmly back to the Mimic. Now, let's be clear, this obviously wasn't the plan. Security Breach's mishandling of the story shook up the plot going forward, so the plot of Ruin and Help Wanted 2 was largely course-correcting and reformatting the story to fit this new lore. But that does not mean the Mimic is a retcon. As I said, the stuff from Help Wanted and AR already gives Glitchtrap hints to a new identity, and stuff like Scott having these 70s Fredbear posters in the underground pizzeria simulator location already points to the story going into the past, and Glitchtrap being a part of that past, which doesn't really work for Afton as his story starts mostly in the 80s. Oh, and also there's this bit from the Daco interview.
I always lean sci-fi. I have a tendency to lean sci-fi, even though I try to come back into the roots of the supernatural instead. But I can't help my inclinations to lean sci-fi. So anything that involves possession of AI or possession of machines or circuitry, I love that sort of thing. So I love the idea of Glitchtrap.
So, yeah. Direct from Scott, Glitchtrap is a sci-fi concept. We've had dozens of cases of souls possessing machinery, but with Glitchtrap, we have a machine possessing other machines and even people. Scott went into Glitchtrap with the intent of making an evil AI villain, and that villain was the Mimic. Through and through, Glitchtrap is meant to be code. His death in Help Wanted 2 is showing a route where we could have deleted that code. He's not a spirit, he is not William Afton, he is the Mimic. Also, there's theories like Glitch Both and Glitch Agony which try to somehow explain the Afton involvement with the Mimic as supernatural. Stuff like saying that Afton's agony somehow infected the Mimic circuit boards, or that Afton's soul is also in there with the Mimic and they're kind of merged together, but both of these suck. Actually, all theories of that nature suck. There is no, and I mean no, logical or even half good explanation for how Afton's spirit or his agony could have ended up in the Mimic. He was burned, all that remnant stuff is gone. There is no way for his soul or his agony or any of it to get from his body into the Mimic code. Just let it go. There is no Afton involvement in here. And yeah, that's everything. Carnival news tomorrow.